She vanished after exposing the most powerful people in America. They called her a traitor, but the truth she revealed shook the entire government. Stay with me, because what happened next turned her name into a legend. Before we begin, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and comment your city below. Let's see where justice is watching from. The road had long since surrendered to wilderness by the time Danielle Carter saw the first glint of water through the thinning trees. Asphalt had given way to gravel, gravel to dirt, and then to little more than a scar through the forest, a forgotten path leading to a place no one had spoken of in years. Her hands gripped the steering wheel with a strength that came less from control than from habit. They were the hands of a woman who had once held a badge, who had pointed a gun in the name of justice, and who had signed reports that condemned men to prison and sometimes to death. But those days were gone. The woman in the driver's seat was no longer Special Agent Carter. She was just Danielle, and she was running. For 6 years, she had carried the weight of a silence too heavy to name. Officially, it was burnout, the Bureau's polite word for broken. But the truth was far uglier. She had survived an operation that wasn't meant to be survived, an off-the-books mission that had left her partner, Jonathan Doyle, in a body bag and her career in ruins. And while the Bureau called it an accident, whispered about her incompetence and emotional instability, she knew better. She knew they had lied, they had buried the truth, and with it, the last good man she had ever trusted. The house appeared suddenly, rising from the cliffside like part of the mountain itself. Its weathered wooden frame clung stubbornly to the stone, its faded walls the color of ash. A narrow wooden bridge connected it to the shore, stretching over a lake so still and dark it looked like polished obsidian. Danielle parked the truck at the edge of the clearing and sat there, unmoving, staring at the house that had cost her just $700. $700 for a lifetime of ghosts. She closed her eyes and inhaled. The air here was different, heavy with pine and rain, but beneath it she caught something else. Metal, ash, memory. Her heart thudded once, hard, before settling into the steady rhythm of resignation. This was where she would begin again. Or perhaps where everything would end. The bridge creaked beneath her boots as she crossed, each step echoing over the black water. Halfway across, she paused and glanced down. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman in her 40s with deep brown skin, dark eyes lined with exhaustion, and a single streak of silver cutting through tightly coiled hair. She did not look like the agent she had once been. She looked older, lonelier, and far more dangerous. At the door, the rusted key stuck before turning with a reluctant groan. The house smelled like time itself, dust, wood rot, and something faintly electric. She stepped inside, and the floorboards sighed beneath her weight, as if the structure were waking from a long sleep. Light filtered weakly through tattered curtains, painting the interior in shades of gray. A table and 2 chairs. A bookshelf bending under the weight of old case files. A coat on a rack, still shaped as if someone had just taken it off. Danielle's pulse quickened. The municipal clerk in town had told her the property was abandoned after the previous owner died. But nothing about this place felt abandoned. It felt paused, like someone had simply stepped out and never returned. She moved slowly through the living room, scanning for signs of intrusion. Her instincts, dulled by years of self-imposed exile but not forgotten, stirred awake. There were no footprints in the dust, no broken locks, but there was something else, a weight, a presence, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The office was at the end of a narrow hallway, and the moment she stepped inside, time stopped. Papers lay scattered across a desk, their edges yellowed and curling, and on top, a single sheet, written in handwriting she knew as well as her own. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it. Signed simply, J." Her throat tightened. Jonathan. Danielle sank into the chair behind the desk, the wood groaning beneath her. She hadn't said his name aloud in 6 years. She had tried to erase him, to bury every memory of his crooked smile, his relentless idealism, the way he always called her Carter, even off duty. He had believed in the Bureau long after she'd stopped. And he had believed in the case that got him killed. The official report said the explosion was caused by a faulty gas main during an unauthorized surveillance op, but Danielle knew the truth. They had been close, too close, to something that reached higher than either of them understood. Jonathan had died for it, and she had signed the report that erased it. Her gaze swept the room again, this time noticing details she'd missed before. A mug with a chipped handle, his mug. A faded jacket with a bureau patch still clinging to the sleeve. A faint indentation on the cushion of the chair across from her, as if someone had just been sitting there. The air was thick with absence. Drawn by instinct more than reason, she followed a cable running along the baseboard to a loose panel beneath the desk. Inside was a small metal box, its surface coated in dust. She pried it open and stared. A single flash drive lay inside, wrapped in black tape marked with red ink. Case 47R. Her breath caught. She knew that designation. The investigation they had been running before everything fell apart. The one she'd been ordered to forget. Her hands trembled as she turned it over, feeling the weight of it, heavier than any weapon she had ever held. It was the key to everything. A floorboard creaked somewhere behind her. Danielle froze. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of electricity, the faint lapping of water against the rocks outside. She turned slowly, scanning the dim corners of the room. Nothing. And yet, the sensation of being watched crawled over her skin. She walked to the window. Across the lake, the tree line was still, but then, there, a flicker of light, faint, deliberate, like a signal. Danielle's pulse hammered in her ears. She turned off the lamp and let the room fall into shadow. The house felt alive now, as if it had been waiting for her, waiting for this moment. She slipped the flash drive into her pocket and sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the forest settling around her. There was no going back. Not now. Whatever Jonathan had uncovered hadn't died with him. It had been waiting here, buried in the silence, and it had chosen her to finish what he started. When she finally lay down in the small bedroom, sleep came in broken fragments, stitched together by memories she'd spent years trying to forget. Jonathan's voice crackling through a radio, his warning, trust no one inside the Bureau, and the promise they had made long ago, we'll finish this together. As dawn crept over the lake, Danielle Carter awoke with the flash drive still clutched in her hand. The world outside was silent, but inside, something had shifted. She was no longer just a woman running from her past. She was the only one left to expose it. And the house, this strange, haunted place clinging to the edge of the water, was where the reckoning would begin. The morning light over the lake was pale and distant, filtered through a thin veil of mist that clung stubbornly to the surface of the water. Danielle Carter stood by the window of the old house, a mug of bitter black coffee warming her hands, and watched the world slowly awaken. The silence was heavy, thicker than the fog, as if the place itself were holding back 1,000 unspoken words. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, Jonathan's voice echoed in her head. Trust no one inside the bureau. The flash drive lay on the small wooden table beside her, wrapped in the same black tape she had found it in, the red letters of Case 47R burning into her memory. It felt like a ghost from another life, one she had buried under layers of resignation and shame. Now it was back, demanding answers she wasn't sure she wanted to find. She turned on the old laptop she had brought with her, battered from years of neglect but still functional. The machine hummed to life, and with a deep breath she inserted the flash drive. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a single folder appeared, 47R. Inside were dozens of encrypted files, strange extensions she didn't recognize, lines of symbols and gibberish text. But one folder stood out, its name simple, almost mocking in lowercase. Remember? Her pulse quickened. She clicked it open. Photographs filled the screen, grainy black and white surveillance shots. Men in suits exchanging briefcases in a dimly lit garage. A senator, one she had seen on television leading a congressional intelligence committee, speaking with a man whose face was obscured by shadow. Then came internal bureau documents, each stamped classified in red ink, annotated in Jonathan's familiar handwriting. The files spoke of covert operations, illegal transfers, staged disappearances masked as routine missions, the kind of activities the Bureau had always denied even existed. Danielle's breath caught as the puzzle began to form. Jonathan had uncovered something enormous, a conspiracy woven deep into the core of the Bureau itself. And if the evidence on this flash drive was real, he had been silenced for it. She spent hours copying the files to her laptop, then disconnected the drive and slipped it back into her pocket. Experience had taught her one brutal lesson. Digital evidence alone could disappear. It could be rewritten, erased, buried, just like Jonathan. The house creaked as she moved through it, searching for more. It was during this aimless exploration that she noticed a small irregularity in the wallpaper of the hallway, a slight bulge. Peeling it back, she discovered a concealed compartment built into the wall. Inside was a rusted metal box sealed with 2 latches. Her heart hammered as she pried it open. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, along with old photographs and a small voice recorder. The first notebook's pages were water-damaged but still legible. At first, the entries were routine field notes, times, locations, code names, but halfway through, the handwriting grew frantic. They know I'm still digging. The calls are different now. No one uses names. Even Michael doesn't know how deep this goes. If she finds this place, if Danielle finds it, tell her to finish what I started. Danielle's throat tightened. She turned the page. Names, initials, bank accounts, cryptic references to something called Project Echo. And then, underlined twice, trust no one in the Bureau, not even the ones you think you saved. Her hands shook as she picked up the recorder and pressed play. Static filled the room, followed by Jonathan's voice, hoarse, hurried, terrified. If you're hearing this, I'm still in the house. I can't leave yet. I think they traced the signal. I've hidden the files, but they'll come for me. Don't go to the Bureau, Danny. They'll call you unstable again. Say you're seeing ghosts. They buried this once. They'll bury it again. A door slammed in the background. Footsteps. Then a muffled cry. And silence. The sound drained the blood from her face. For 6 years, she had convinced herself that Jonathan's death was a tragic accident, that nothing could have saved him. But now, listening to his final moments, she knew the truth. He hadn't just died. He had been hunted. Danielle stepped outside for air, the cold biting against her skin. The lake was impossibly still, a mirror reflecting the gray sky above. Somewhere beneath that surface, she saw ghosts, two younger agents standing side by side, full of purpose, still believing justice meant something. That was before everything burned. Before the system turned on them. A rustle in the trees broke her reverie. Quick, deliberate. She turned sharply. Nothing. Only wind moving through the pines. Yet the feeling of eyes on her skin refused to fade. The unease clung to her all afternoon. She cataloged every piece of evidence she had found, photographed notebooks, transcribed recordings, backed up everything on an encrypted drive. And yet, the more she uncovered, the more dangerous the situation felt. These weren't just dirty agents or a rogue faction. This was rot at the highest level. Rot that killed anyone who tried to expose it. By sunset, Danielle decided to make a trip into town for supplies. The grocery store was small, its shelves lined with faded brands and dust-coated cans. The cashier, an older white man with weathered hands and suspicious eyes, scanned her items slowly. "You're staying up by the lake?" he asked, his tone too casual. "Yeah," Danielle replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Bought the old house by the cliff." The man's brows knitted. "That place has been empty a long time. You sure you want to live there? Alone?" "Why wouldn't I?" He hesitated. "Folks say it's bad luck. The last owner, well, no one knows what happened. Sheriff came out a couple times. Then the feds. House went quiet after that." He handed her the change, his gaze never leaving her face. "Some things are better left alone." The words followed her back through the forest. By the time she reached the bridge, the fog had returned, thicker now, swallowing the moon's reflection. As she stepped out of the truck, something caught her eye. Movement in the tree line. A flicker of light. Then nothing. The house felt colder than before. Danielle locked the door, double-checked every window, but the silence was broken by a faint scrape from the living room, like a chair being moved. "Hello?" she called, her voice steady. No answer. She grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the room. The beam revealed an overturned chair near the window. The curtain swayed slightly, though the window was shut tight. Her pulse thundered. Then she saw it. A tiny red light blinking on a camera in the corner. She hadn't noticed it before. Tracing the cable down the wall, she discovered a hidden power strip connected to a small network switch. Jonathan had wired the house for surveillance, but why was the system still active? She powered the monitors. One by one, grainy images flickered to life. The porch, the bridge, the clearing behind the house. Most showed only darkness, but one, angled toward the road, captured a brief flash, the headlights of a car. She rewound and paused. The plate was partially visible, C-57. It meant nothing, but her gut said otherwise. Every instinct screamed that this was no coincidence. Someone knew she was here, and someone was watching. Sleep was impossible. Danielle spent the night writing down everything she had found, names, dates, locations, piecing together the scope of the corruption. When dawn returned, pale and indifferent, the surface of the lake was smooth again. But the peace was gone. She understood now. This was bigger than Jonathan. Bigger than either of them. And if she wanted to finish what he started, she would have to stop being the woman who ran. She would have to become the woman who fought back. And she knew deep down that someone, somewhere, was already preparing to stop her. The storm clouds that gathered over the lake that morning seemed to mirror the tension building inside Danielle Carter. She sat at the desk in the dim light, her laptop humming quietly, the cursor blinking on a blank email she'd been rewriting for hours. It was addressed to someone she hadn't spoken to in years, investigative journalist Elena Price, a woman known for chasing the kind of stories that could ruin powerful men. Danielle's fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. "If you're reading this," she typed, "then I'm probably already gone. The files attached will explain everything: Jonathan Doyle's death, the corruption he uncovered, and the people who silenced him. Publish everything. Don't wait." Her heart pounded as she read the words again. This was it, the point of no return. Once she pressed send, there would be no going back. They would come for her, just as they had come for Jonathan. But the truth deserved more than her fear. She hit the key. The message vanished into the void. For the first time in 6 years, Danielle felt like she was doing something that mattered. She spent the next several hours methodically preparing for what she knew was coming. She encrypted the flash drive again, making 3 backups: one buried in the woods near the water line, one hidden under a floorboard in the house, and one sealed in a waterproof pouch strapped beneath a small rowboat tied to the dock. The recorder with Jonathan's final words stayed close to her, tucked into the inside pocket of her jacket like a heartbeat. Every movement was careful, deliberate. She cleaned the fingerprints from every surface she had touched. She closed the shutters and dimmed the lights. She double-checked her pistol, loading a spare magazine and sliding it into place with the cold efficiency of someone who had done this too many times before. By late afternoon, the weather shifted. Wind swept through the trees, shaking loose pine needles that danced across the porch. Rain was coming, the kind of relentless, cold rain that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. Danielle stood by the window, watching as the gray sky deepened to charcoal. That was when she saw it. A black SUV parked just beyond the trees. Its windows were tinted, the engine was running, and though she couldn't see their faces, she didn't need to. Every nerve in her body recognized the stillness of trained professionals. They were here. She turned off the lights, plunging the house into darkness. The silence grew heavier, the air electric with tension. Minutes passed like hours. Then the sound came, a car door shutting softly. Then another. Gravel crunching beneath boots. Voices, low and steady, cutting through the rain. 2, maybe 3 of them. Danielle's pulse remained calm. Fear was useless now. She crouched beneath the window and peeked through a gap in the curtain. A faint beam of light swept across the bridge. They were crossing it, slow, methodical, like wolves closing in on wounded prey. She slipped the recorder from her pocket, pressed the button, and whispered, "This is Danielle Carter. If anyone finds this, the files are already out. They can kill me, but they cannot kill the truth." She set the recorder beside the laptop and drew her pistol. The first knock came moments later, soft, polite. "Miss Carter," a voice called out, smooth and professional, "we need to speak with you about some recent communications. Please open the door." Danielle said nothing. The second knock was harder. "You don't want this to get difficult. Let's make this easy for everyone." Still nothing. Metal struck wood, the door shuddered. They were forcing it. Danielle stepped back, positioning herself behind the hallway corner where she'd have the advantage. The door burst open with a splintering crack, and the first silhouette stepped inside, flashlight sweeping the darkness. The second followed, gun drawn, scanning for movement. Danielle moved. The fight was brutal and fast, a blur of motion and instinct. The first man barely had time to react before she slammed into him, sending his weapon clattering across the floor. The second raised his gun, but she fired first. The sound thundered through the house, the recoil jarring her arm. The man collapsed, his flashlight spinning wildly across the walls. The surviving agent lunged at her and they crashed into the table, scattering Jonathan's files. She twisted his wrist until his weapon dropped, then drove her knee into his chest, knocking the air from his lungs. He fell, gasping, and she stood over him, breathing hard, pistol trained on his face. The wind howled through the broken door, carrying the smell of rain and gunpowder. Danielle glanced down. The badge on his jacket read Department of Homeland Security. Her worst fear was confirmed. This wasn't a rogue hit squad. This was official, sanctioned. "They sent you," she whispered, half to herself, "just like they sent them for Jonathan." A noise shattered the silence, a scrape against the window. Another shadow moved outside, then another. She could see them now, faint silhouettes against the lightning-lit sky. There were more of them, and they were closing in. There was no time left. Danielle grabbed the waterproof bag, stuffed the recorder and a spare flash drive inside, and bolted through the back door into the rain. The forest swallowed her instantly, branches clawing at her jacket as she sprinted down the narrow path to the dock. Wind tore at her hair, rain stung her skin, but she didn't stop. Behind her, flashlights cut through the trees, shouts echoing across the night. A shot rang out, bark exploded from a tree trunk inches from her face. She stumbled, caught herself, and kept moving. The dock appeared through the rain, slick and swaying. Danielle leapt onto the small rowboat, untying the rope with trembling fingers. A bullet grazed her shoulder, searing pain ripping through her body. She gritted her teeth and shoved off. The boat lurched into the water, rocking violently as she rowed with every ounce of strength left in her. Gunshots cracked behind her. One hit the water near the boat, another splintered the edge of the dock. But she kept rowing, deeper and deeper into the lake, until the house was a distant, shadowy silhouette clinging to the cliffside. Lightning split the sky. In that brief flash, Danielle saw the shape of the house reflected in the black water, and then the explosion. The sound was deafening, like the world itself tearing apart. Fire roared from the windows, then vanished beneath sheets of rain. The cliff trembled. Debris crashed into the lake. And then, silence. The house that had held so many secrets was gone. Danielle floated in the middle of the lake, blood soaking through her sleeve, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. The rain washed over her, cold and relentless, but she didn't move. They would think she was dead, and maybe that was good. It would buy her time. She glanced at the small waterproof bag secured under the boat. Jonathan's last words, the files, the truth they had tried so hard to bury. It was still here, still alive, and so was she. She turned the boat toward the far shore, where the forest was thick and the mountains rose beyond. She didn't know what waited for her there, but she knew one thing: the war wasn't over. It had just begun. The rain had not stopped by the time Danielle Carter dragged herself to the far shore. The sky hung low and bruised, swollen with clouds that churned like an angry sea. Every step she took was heavy, from exhaustion, from blood loss, from the weight of everything that had happened. Her left shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed it, and her hands were raw from rowing against the storm. But she was alive, and as long as she was alive, the truth still had a chance. The forest swallowed her as soon as she stepped off the boat. Pines towered overhead, their branches heavy with rain. The earth beneath her boots turned to mud with every step. She moved slowly and deliberately, using every ounce of training the Bureau had ever given her. Stick to the shadows, break your trail, never stay in one place too long. Somewhere behind her, sirens would come, maybe drones, maybe agents on foot. But they would find only the shattered remains of a house and an empty lake. They would believe she was dead. And for now, that was exactly what she needed them to believe. By dawn, the rain had eased into a steady drizzle. Danielle found shelter in the ruins of an old ranger cabin, long abandoned and half swallowed by ivy. She collapsed onto the dusty floorboards, her chest heaving, her mind replaying the night over and over again. The explosion, the gunshots, Jonathan's voice on the recorder, "They're inside." The words no longer felt like a warning. They were a mission. Hours passed before she moved again. She bandaged her shoulder with strips torn from her shirt, drank rainwater collected in a dented metal pan, and checked the waterproof bag that had never left her side. The recorder was still intact. So was the spare flash drive. Everything that mattered, everything that could burn down the system, was still in her possession. It was time to plan her next move. Hiding was not an option. She had done that before. Run from the truth, buried it beneath silence and shame, and it had cost Jonathan his life. This time, she would not run. She would finish what they had started. Danielle waited until nightfall before moving again. She followed a narrow game trail deeper into the mountains, her steps cautious and silent. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, set her nerves on edge. More than once she thought she heard movement behind her, the faint rhythm of boots on wet ground. But whenever she turned, the forest was empty. By the second night, she reached a small roadside diner on the outskirts of a forgotten town, the kind of place truckers stopped at when they didn't want to be found. She slipped inside, hood pulled low, and sat at a corner booth with a clear view of the exit. A tired waitress poured her coffee without a word. Danielle's eyes flicked to the television mounted above the counter. A news anchor's voice filled the room. Federal authorities are investigating an explosion that destroyed a remote property last night. Sources say the site was under surveillance in connection with an ongoing investigation. The footage showed what was left of the house, a smoking crater on the edge of a cliff. The anchor continued. No bodies have been recovered. Danielle allowed herself a faint, grim smile. Good. Let them think she was gone. She spent 2 more days hiding in the shadows of that town, watching, listening. And then she made contact. The journalist, Elena Price, responded to her message. "Meet me. Safe place. No bureau." Danielle read the encrypted email twice before deleting it. She knew it could be a trap, but she also knew she didn't have a choice. The meeting was set for midnight in an abandoned train yard 30 miles away. Danielle arrived early, her pistol tucked into the waistband of her jeans, the waterproof bag slung across her back. The air smelled of rust and oil, and the skeletal remains of freight cars loomed like ghosts in the darkness. Elena appeared 5 minutes late, wearing a long coat and carrying a single leather satchel. Her face was pale, but her eyes, sharp, unafraid, locked on Danielle's immediately. "You're supposed to be dead," Elena said. "Not yet," Danielle replied, "but I will be if we don't get this out." They moved quickly, crouching behind a rusted car as Danielle handed over the flash drive and a copy of Jonathan's notebooks. Elena flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from curiosity to horror. "This is huge," she whispered. "These names. If this goes public, it'll tear Washington apart." "That's the idea," Danielle said. "Jonathan died for this. They tried to kill me for this. It's time the world knew what they're hiding." Before Elena could reply, the night shattered. Headlights flared at the far end of the yard. Black SUVs, 3 of them, rolled silently into view. Doors opened. Men in tactical gear spilled out, weapons raised. Danielle's blood ran cold. They had found her. "Run," she hissed, but Elena didn't move. "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are," Danielle snapped. "They want me, not you. You publish. That's how you finish this." For a second, their eyes met. Journalist and whistleblower, both women who had been dismissed, underestimated, ignored. Then Elena nodded and vanished into the shadows with the evidence. Danielle turned to face the approaching agents. Her heart pounded, but fear had no place here. She was done hiding. She drew her pistol, ducking behind the train car as bullets ripped through the night. Sparks exploded against metal. Shouts echoed across the yard. She returned fire, hitting one agent in the leg and forcing the others to take cover. But they were too many, and she knew she couldn't hold them forever. Her only chance was to buy Elena time. She moved from cover to cover, firing in short bursts, drawing them farther from the exit. Every shot was a statement. "You will not silence me. Not this time." A bullet tore into her side, knocking the air from her lungs. She stumbled, dropped to one knee, and pressed her hand to the wound. Warm blood soaked through her shirt. Still, she fired again. Another agent fell. The last thing she saw before darkness began to close in was Elena, sprinting across the road, disappearing into the night, with Jonathan's truth in her hands. Danielle smiled through the pain. For the first time since that terrible night 6 years ago, she knew she had done enough. Maybe she wouldn't live to see it. Maybe they would kill her here, in this forgotten place. But the truth was already beyond their reach. And the war that Jonathan had started, their war, was about to begin. The story broke 3 weeks later. It started as a trickle, an anonymous leak to a small independent news site. And by the end of the day, it had become a tidal wave. National networks picked it up within hours. Congressional hearings were called within days. The Bureau, the Department of Homeland Security, and even members of the Senate Intelligence Committee were suddenly under investigation for illegal surveillance programs, secret offshore accounts, assassinations of whistleblowers, and operations that officially had never existed. The headlines filled every screen. Secret files expose deep state corruption. Agents murdered to protect illegal operations. Black female agent's death tied to government cover-up. The last headline made Elena Price's hands shake as she stared at the newspaper. They had written Danielle Carter's obituary as though it were fact. Former FBI agent presumed dead in gun battle. No one had seen her since the raid on the train yard. Her body had never been found. The Bureau offered no comment, but Elena knew the truth. Danielle had survived that night, if not in body, then in the voice that now echoed across the nation. The files Danielle had entrusted to her were more explosive than anyone had imagined. They named names. They exposed networks that stretched across decades. They linked covert operations to private contractors, political campaigns, and even foreign governments. Every document was backed by evidence: photos, bank transfers, field reports, voice recordings, and Jonathan Doyle's final message. "They're inside. Trust no one. If you're hearing this, tell her to finish it." And she had. The fallout was immediate. Senators resigned overnight, several high-ranking officials disappeared, their offices emptied by dawn. Arrest followed. Some of the Bureau's most decorated leaders were charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and murder. Others fled the country before indictments could be issued. But the victory was bittersweet. For every official brought down, another denial surfaced. For every confession, a carefully crafted lie followed. The government called it an internal breach. The Bureau promised reforms, but the people, the public who had watched the truth unravel, knew it was more than that. It was a reckoning, and at the center of it all was a woman who no one could find. The locals who lived near the lake told stories. They said that on foggy nights, when the water was perfectly still and the wind was silent, a single light could be seen flickering across the surface, right where the porch of the old house had once stood. Some claimed they heard a voice carried across the water, low and steady, calling out into the darkness. Others swore they saw a figure, a woman in a dark jacket, standing at the water's edge before vanishing into the mist. No one ever proved any of it. Yet the legend of Danielle Carter grew. In time, her story became something larger than one woman's fight. It became a rallying cry for whistleblowers, for truth-tellers, for anyone who had been silenced and forgotten. Activists painted murals of her face on courthouse walls. Investigative journalists named awards after her. Law students studied her case as proof that justice didn't always come from the inside. Even inside the bureau, things began to change. Quietly, and not without resistance, new oversight committees were formed. Whistleblower protections were strengthened. Entire divisions were dismantled and rebuilt under new leadership. It was not enough, not yet, but it was a start. Elena visited the lake once, years after the story broke. The house was gone, nothing left but scorched earth and the jagged skeleton of the cliff. But the place felt alive, charged with the weight of everything that had happened there. She walked down to the water's edge and stood in silence. The lake was calm, reflecting the overcast sky like a mirror. She closed her eyes and listened. For a moment, she swore she could hear it. Faint, but unmistakable, Danielle's voice carried on the wind. "We don't serve them. We serve the truth." A single tear slipped down Elena's cheek as she whispered into the stillness, "You did it." Then she turned and walked away, leaving the lake behind, but never the story. Because Danielle Carter's disappearance was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of something bigger. Her sacrifice had ignited a movement that could not be silenced. Her fight had shown the world that one person, one black woman dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed, could bring an empire of lies crashing down. And though her body was never found, her presence was everywhere. In every article written about government accountability and every protest demanding transparency, and every whistleblower who stepped forward emboldened by her courage. The lake still remembered. The cliff still stood. And the house, though long since destroyed, still spoke in its own way in the silence it left behind. The story was over. But the truth Danielle carried had found its voice, and once spoken, it would never be silenced again. Her body was never found, but her voice still echoes in every fight for justice. Danielle Carter proved that one person can change everything, even against the most powerful. If this story inspired you, subscribe for more, like this video, and share it with someone who still believes that the truth can't be silenced. And don't forget to comment your city below. Justice has no borders.